formal mission of U equals me is stated as a movement of conscientious objectors to intolerance, or simply stated, a movement against intolerance. And the exploration of that statement really gets to what are the similarities between people? What do we all have in common? Why are we really equal as humankind? And that's what we're going to explore.
This podcast is about exploring conversational thoughts and interviews with extraordinary people living ordinary lives of well-being. Discussions on exactly what well-being means to people day to day, factors that can influence it both internally and externally. We glean insights on how to survive and thrive in feeling satisfied in life with a greater sense of purpose. Guest hosts bring fresh new outlooks and opinions from spirituality, science, worldviews, and standing up and speaking out for what's right.
It's pretty interesting. Man needs each other and planet Earth to survive. Check it out. I think you'll like what you hear.
Hello, and welcome to today's U equals me podcast. Thank you all for listening and joining us. This is Bruce Jarvis, husband of the founder of the U equals me Foundation, Cindy Jarvis, who for the second time is graciously allowing me to take the mic, which means I must have cleared the bar the first time I hosted, which would truly surprise my high school high jump coach, the late legendary Frank Ahern, who was visibly relieved upon my retirement after 2 weeks of track practice my senior year at Franklin High School in Seattle. Coach Ahern joked that in my quest to be a three-sport athlete, I truly set a low bar in that event. In any case, today we have reset the bar, and I have the pleasure of chatting with one of the great teachers, or as he calls it, caretakers of the game of basketball, Tom Newell. Over 1,000 male and female athletes aged from their 30s on down to single digits, players from rec league to AAU to middle, high school, small, mid-major, and power conference universities, national teams in Japan and elsewhere, professional teams in China, Belgium, Greece, Italy, Central and South America, not to mention the Portland Fire and the WNBA, and NBA players from the Indiana Pacers, New Jersey Nets, Dallas Mavericks, and Seattle Sonics. Pretty much all those folks and more respectfully call my guest today, Coach Tom. Welcome, Tom Newell.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Cindy. Thank you, U equals me. I'm honored on this last day of 2020 that has truly been transparent and clear vision for so many people in this world and planet. I look forward to the new cycle of 365, 24/7, and I think of a better way to end December 31st than with the duo, the tandem of the Jarvis group here. All right, let's go for it, man.
So one of the things we're going to talk about is your coming efforts in Europe, working with young players. And as a background for our listeners, let's start by talking about what you see as the similarities and differences between basketballers at different ages and skill levels and from different cultures and nationalities.
Well, number one, the resources. We have the best resources in the world for youth sports. Not just basketball, but soccer. Soccer exponentially, has grown over the last 20 years. And having three children that all participated at an early age in that, as well as other activities, it amazes me to see how those young participants evolved into other athletic endeavors. So I look to Europe, and the number one resource they have there are dirt fields and grass fields, turf, for football, which is also known as soccer here in English. So when you look at structure, which creates the behavior, we have great structure. Unfortunately, the Europeans have what is called sports academies. So they groom young male and female athletes in soccer at a very early age.
Right.
And that actually begins at 9 and 10 years of age, especially if the bloodlines are from a World Cup participant. So
are you saying?
Go ahead.
Are you saying then that the basketball as a sport over there is advantaged by young kids always starting out or mostly starting out in soccer or football, they call it, or is it disadvantaged because they are so prone to treat that as their primary sport?
100% of the players that are playing in the NBA from European and other international countries have had a soccer introduction to contact and organized sports.
Which has got to be great for their feet.
Absolutely. And if you take a look at some of the great post players in Elijah Wan, all right, and Patrick Ewing, I wouldn't say Olin Paulinis, although he evolved to be a pretty good athlete, but he wasn't as adept. He was all thumbs as far as his hands were concerned when he played in the NBA.
Well, there was a guy that San Antonio for a number of years that was pretty good because of his soccer beginnings, right?
That's right. David Robinson and also Tim Duncan.
Right.
So no, that's good call there, Bruce. So, my whole passion right now, Bruce, is the imposition of the suspension in young people's lives, their young sports lives in terms of activities. Being able to run and fall and have friends feel sorry because you're bleeding from your knee or your elbow, and understanding what camaraderie is, understanding what that support is, and trust and love. Mom and dad wasn't around, but my friend was there, when I fell out of the tree, and so there are just a lot of things that kids are missing out on. But one of the things that innately, all right, that is coming to the forefront here is human behavior. And now they're picking up areas of human behavior in adults that they have never seen before because everything had been scheduled and ordered. Their jobs, occupations, whatever it may be, the practices, recitals, right, school, whatever. That's all been interrupted. And so now I'm supporting a program, and I'm glad that U equals Me is going to be a part of the program. And that is Back to Their Future, all right, which is all about the kids. And it begins with the models to follow. And so a lot of my work going forward is going to be in Belgium introducing a new model to follow regarding the coach models and working with the Belgian Federation on that, which I already have their support from the Olympic Committee and other professional coaches there. So that is the template, Coach, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
How does that differ from what might be the predominant ordinary model that we see in today's game, both in the U.S. and in Europe?
American coaches are not required to be certified. And by that, I'm saying they don't go through a American Youth Soccer Association, AYSA, 8-hour to 10-hour program to get a Series A, Series B license. Same with volleyball. All right, basketball is the only one. Now, there's some. I mean, when I was in Seattle, I introduced it to the Seattle Parks and Recreation Department, where coaches that volunteer and assistants have to go through a training regimen and become aware of first aid, injury prevention, and awareness of what to do in case of emergency, what have you. That's never been done, all right, in youth basketball before. AAU basketball, all right, that's become all about you. AAU is all about you. And so the problem that we have is that we're lacking in proper models to follow. We don't have the support in the communities that we used to have, with individuals that understood the game and the fundamentals and the hard work that went into the game. Now we have coaches, that are picking out players that have been promulgated and putting together teams that are sponsored, by businessmen that want to get their name out there and associated. And then you have agents come in. So it's all warped right now. Europe, I will say this, at least they're a little more refined in their application towards player development. The issue that I have is their model to follow is broken for both boys and girls. All right. They're more interested in their well-being of having security than having a passion to teach. And so you have people that took lessons out of a book, never played the game, never coached the game, never understood the emotions that go in, never understood how the ego cannot be your amigo. All right. As you evolve with the game, or you're not going to last very long. And so there's just a lot of nuances that these coaches that are in the modern game in Belgium are clueless about.
Now
that's where I'm at.
Let me back up and define for the
Go ahead, man.
Listeners today where you're coming from. If the listeners could understand your depth of experience coaching at four different NBA teams, and actually being a mentor to the present Dallas Mavericks coach. Tell us a little bit about that in your past, because it so defines the expertise that you have to make the statements that you're making.
Well, my whole entry into the NBA began on the East Coast when I was scouting for the Golden State Warriors back in 1980-81. And we had just relocated from Eastern California, Bishop, California, to Charlottesville. And so I started scouting the Sun Belt. I have Virginia, Commonwealth, that was in that league then. And so University of Alabama, Birmingham had Dean Bartow, who had just left UCLA, was the AD and the new coach at Alabama, Birmingham, that had, just a lot of young teams there. And then I scouted Big East and ACC and Independence, Division II, and became friends with Charles Oakley when he was a senior in college, and talked to him before he went into the draft, and just encouraged him on the things to focus on. And boom, who would know that he would be on a championship team a couple times. So yeah, I'm really fortunate, Bruce, to have had the genre over the eras of the game and how it's changed through the 80s and 90s, and the 2000s and entering into a new decade. And we'll talk about that too, because I have some opinions on that. So
okay, talk about it.
All right. So technology. All right. I want parents to understand something about hard work, grinding, commitment, discipline, and a visual of success. I see technology going to the level of I just want to make this one statement, Bruce.
Sure.
Is that I'm a parent, okay, and I've gone through all the Christmases and the features of boys and girls and all their friends and what they want for Christmas and what have you. All right. And I've seen the advancement of technology. What I'm here to tell you is that because of gaming and because of NBA 2K and the advancement of that, and now the advancement, all right, of having every team in the NBA has a gaming professional that's making $180,000 a year, all right, representing the club and a legal gaming program amongst other teams. All right.
What does that mean?
Is that parents are going to have a real
define that.
What does that mean?
Listeners? Yeah.
Well, that means that they're able to put together teams to compete against other NBA teams online. So it's like a fantasy competition. Okay. And so the Mavericks have one of the top gamers, as they call them. I know nothing about that merd. Okay. I know nothing about that caca. All right. Have no interest. What I'm saying is that parents are going to be faced with a dilemma in the near future for birthdays and for holidays, Christmases, of buying their child a virtual reality adapter. And now what's going to happen is that the repetitions and the practice time out on the street or a playground or a park or in the driveway or in the backyard, all those reps of practicing on their own and fantasizing, visualizing, making a shot, a bank shot, whatever, are going to be replaced with now virtual reality.
So what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is because it is a profit line item for an NBA team, they're actually doing things that will disadvantage a young athlete by taking them away from practicing on the game to practicing at the keyboard and with a mouse.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I that's an interesting thought. Let's go back to your work. The present coach of the Dallas Mavericks is who?
Rick Carlisle.
Okay, and tell us about your history with Rick Carlisle.
I met Rick 1982. He was a transfer student to the University of Virginia from, I believe, was University of Vermont. And so he had 2 years eligibility. He was redshirting that year upon transfer. Excuse me. We became very, very good friends, a teacher-student relationship. And he trained with me for 3 years. The last year, he trained with me, or that summer going into his senior year, I told him in an evaluation that I gave to each of the players that I believed he could play in the NBA, but for only one team.
Which was?
And that was the Boston Celtics.
Why?
And he ended up getting drafted at the end of his senior year. I had not talked to anybody on the Celtics, scouting staff or whatever. I had recommended him at that time for the Indiana Pacers in the third, fourth round. And Boston picked him up before me. But I had foresaw the only team that would recognize the value of his skill set and his quotient would be the Celtics because of Bird and Dennis Johnson and McHale and Chief and all those guys. And he got drafted.
Right.
And we stayed in touch. Long story short, Rick and I stayed in contact. I encouraged him to get into coaching and introduced him to my father's big man's camp. And my dad had him as a passer and spent many hours talking basketball with him. And Rick ended up one of the coaches that had his own players at his station, along with Tim Gergerich and Mark Ivoroni.
One second. You referred to your father, so we have to introduce your father. Tom's father, Pete Newell, is in the Hall of Fame for his work in basketball at several levels. He is on the court. His name is on the court at the University of California at Berkeley, the Pete Newell Court. Tell the folks about your dad.
He's the first coach to win the trifecta in college basketball. 1949, the USF Dons won what was then considered the big dance, the NIT. USF, unknown team from the West Coast, traveled by train, I believe. They came back by plane, but I believe they traveled by train back to New York and won the NIT there in 1949. My father also won the NCAA championship with Cal Berkeley, the only championship Cal has ever won in basketball. And then 1960, they repeated, but they lost to Ohio State. Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek, two Hall of Fame players. And in 1960, my father also coached what was then considered the original Dream Team with Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Walter Bellamy, Jerry Lucas, Darrell Imhoff, Adrian Smith, and the list goes on. And they won a gold medal. The average win was 45 points a game.
Right.
And the ball they played with was the same size as a soccer ball.
And so your dad, we could talk about him for a long time, but there was a pretty good coach down at UCLA who, until the day he died, called Pete Newell his favorite coach. And I think for one of the reasons was that he was the only coach that had a winning record against that particular coach. Who was that?
That was my father. He had never lost to Coach Wooden in his career. He had an 8-0 record against Coach Wooden.
Of course, I'm talking about Coach John Wooden, the legendary coach of coaches at UCLA. So Pete Newell was his favorite coach. So Coach Tom Newell comes by his talents and his wisdom through his genes, I would say, but I think behaviorally you've done a marvelous job learning the trade as well. So let's take this conversation. I've got a couple questions for you, if you would. Have you had notable failures working with all the different athletes that you've had at all these levels?
I don't know what failure is when you're a teacher.
Okay.
So when I step on the court between the lines, Bruce, when I played, or when I practiced, or I played, or I coached, I have never had a bad practice, a bad game as a player, or a bad game as a coach, because I gave my best effort.
Okay.
I never went in half-assed. I always went in with my best effort. So I don't know. I don't know how to describe or define what you're talking about.
So what
failure.
I'm hearing you say is that those successes are defined by the efforts given.
Exactly. I'll make it real simple. There are 3 parts to a season: the beginning, the middle, and the end. In the beginning, to give you an example, you have a new coach and perhaps new players. You have players that graduated, all right, and you have returning players. And so you have players that are coming up to the team. And it takes maybe they play 20 games, all right? And so it takes, maybe 5 games, the first 5 games, for everybody to get to understand the coach's vernacular, the coach's voice inflection, in practice during a turnover or whatever. And so in those first 5 games, they're like 1-4. Excuse me. But the problem is, and it isn't a problem, in that 1-4 is that, yes, they lost their first game by 18. They lost the next game by 12, and they won a game by 4, and they lost a game, all right, by 5. In all those experiences, in that new environment, that new theater, the new character, the new locker room, all right, the new leadership, they all were learning. And now they go to the middle part of the season. And so that 1-4 now it becomes a 6-1. And now we go to the end of the season where they should be evolving, all right, and trust and what have you. And now you have a team. And now you have the trust. And now you have the support of each other. All right. And now they've been able to overcome adversity and understand that diversity was an opportunity.
Right.
And so what has happened in America today is we've lost sight of the 3 seasons. It's all about me. It's all about the individual. And until we take ownership of understanding that as parents, we have to do a better job of being a model to follow and helping them and supporting them and not specializing that they're better than the other person, but putting them with a model, a teacher that's going to help them grow as a young person so that away from the court, they make good decisions and good choices. That's where they should be investing. All right. The future of their child in sports.
Well, you've talked about your model. As I've observed you working with young athletes, that model is not just about basketball. And in your session, in your athletic sessions, you have usually at least 1 and usually 2 sessions where you take those athletes and you speak to them about the rest of their life. Talk about that, if you would.
Well, I just, the unfortunate part today, Bruce, and when I say unfortunate, I think it comes from your background and my background as former athletes, and the time we put in, and you played multiple sports, so obviously you have a lot more wear and tear on your body than I ever had. But when it came to basketball, I had a very, very committed discipline and it carried over. And the one thing that I remember, and I think the reason that I stayed in youth sports and being an advocate, and a teacher in basketball is because of the bad experiences that I had as a child playing sports and other. And so from that experience, I think that the greater force in the universe than you and I have control over, led me to the area of being a model to follow, not just in sports, but in the communities. And I've done that wherever I've been. So the NBA was really a platform that allowed me the opportunity to work with Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, and other organizations that support youth in the communities. And to this day, there isn't anything that I wouldn't do in the community that support youth and their the positive model that it has for young people.
So as I've heard you talk to these athletes, a couple of Newell wisdoms. It's fun to hear how you talk to these people and what you say to them. Things like the different ways of playing basketball. Could you go over that?
Sure. Basketball is a simple game until coaches put players in a position to fail because they did not teach them properly.
How many ways are there to play basketball, Coach Tom?
Well, it begins with habits. Basketball is a game of habits. How many habits are there, Bruce?
2.
Good habits and bad habits.
Okay.
How many ways can you play the game?
2.
the right way and the wrong way. So if I dribble the ball with my head down, is that a good habit or bad habit? That's a bad habit. Is that the right way or the wrong way? It's the wrong way. And so now we have an understanding. And that's the simplicity that I introduced the game of basketball when I teach every one of my players globally.
And the way that you teach is non-threatening.
Absolutely not. We use humor.
Oh, a ton of humor.
I've gotten down on my knees. I've seen a player make a great move to the basket, using a great head fake, and hesitation and crossover and finish. And I'll go, that was great. And then as he's walking or she's walking, I'll go, but wait a minute, I got to ask you, are you wearing contacts? And they stop, and then the line stops, and they go, no, why? And I get down I go down like I'm picking up a contact lens. And I go, because you keep looking on the floor when you dribble, and I think you lost this contact.
And folks, when he does that, the kids howl, and they love it, and it disarms them, and they learn. And it's so different than so many of the coaches we've all had. That's one of your great strengths, Coach.
Hey, how about this one though? That was a great move. That was awesome. The only problem is, all right, you're going to get 5,000 mileage miles from Alaska Airlines for that.
Okay.
And they'll always give me a thumbs up. Like, yeah, Coach, I got you.
Okay.
Man.
I'm going to ask you three questions. And
go.
At three different levels. And I want your answers, and just for the sake of time, let's keep them as short as possible. If you're
all right.
Okay, if you're able to make one or more changes at the high school basketball level today, what would you do?
Increase the time.
Meaning what?
Make it a 12-minute each quarter.
Okay.
And the reason for that is to give more players an opportunity to develop, because with the NBA and the NCAA agreeing to allow kids senior year to declare for the NBA draft in 22, it's just going to ruin the game of basketball if they keep it at 10 minutes or 8 minutes right now instead of 12.
So how about if you were Mark Emmert, head of the NCAA, what changes would you advise in college basketball?
Well, first off, I'd allow the athletes at all levels, male and female, to have the opportunity to do camps and earn money from those camps wearing the uniform that they represent at a university. Okay. And also that they could have pictures that could be taken and posters made so that they can benefit just as much as a doctorate student or a pre-med student who receives a $250,000 scholarship for their education and also is supplemented each year that they are under that scholarship. So I think the value that an athlete brings to a university wearing that uniform and sacrificing their body at that particular time, not knowing that the sacrifice they're going to pay later in their life when they're in their 50s and 60s, I think that they should be compensated.
So you agree with the coming changes in compensation for personal likenesses, et cetera?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, and how about now? You're Adam Silver, NBA commissioner. How would you improve the NBA and the WNBA on that side?
I'd raise the baskets for men to 11 feet. I'd also extend the baseline a foot on each side.
Oh boy!
I think that what we've seen with COVID, the fact that they've moved the sidelines back, you're never going to see courtside seats on the player side ever again. It's going to be up in the concourse area there, so it's going to be like 10 rows to 12 rows that are removed. So I think it'd be a wonderful opportunity to go ahead and extend that line. And then that would allow the league to be able to keep the 3-point line where it is. Then at 11 feet, you're going to see more execution and you're going to be better spacing and the opportunity of players really developing a skill. They're going to have to put the work in.
Wow. That would really cause some uproar, I think, with the present players.
Well, Bruce, I don't know if you remember, but in 2007, I did a free exhibition at the University of Washington. I raised the baskets to 11 feet. I used former college players, Division I, Division II, and some Euro-Americans that came back. And it was on Fox Sports Northwest. And it was televised. And we only used the 3-point line in the fourth quarter. We used zone offense or zone defense in the first half, zone defense in the second half. It was free. We had 1,200 people that showed up. It was the first game ever that used the technology where people were able to answer Jumbotron questions regarding the game. And the NBA and FIBA contacted me for information on the analytics that we kept. Coach Ernie Woods, myself, and another gentleman, Guy Perry, had kept the statistics for that. And I still have them to my name.
Boy, I think Coach Wooden would be in favor of that. The 11-foot basket taking the slam dunk out of the game for most players.
Well, my dad did it in 1960 at 12 feet.
Wow.
And Coach Wooden had advocated 10 and a half feet. But I think where the athletes are today, and you see LeBron James still forehead above the rim, I don't think 11 feet is going to impede the development of the game. I think it preserves the game, actually.
I don't think for LeBron, 11 feet is going to keep him from stuffing the ball. So let's go philosophically now into topics that you and I have talked about here as we end the podcast. Because I can't think of anybody better to talk about these subjects. We live in divided times with regard to athletes and the concept of tolerance and intolerance. In talking with you as we have in the background for this podcast, you told me something I never thought of. That was, you noted a change in the culture of athletes. You termed, quote, the beginning of disassociative behavior with the, as you termed it, quote, introduction of the headset, end quote. What did you mean by that?
Well, you'll remember this as a professional athlete. We used to have a social behavior interacting in international airports with the public, wherever we traveled. When I was with the Pacers or with the Sonics or with the Nets or Mavericks, that was just common, all right, until the Mavericks, and then we got our own plane. So the headset really hadn't come in yet, all right. Sony hadn't introduced, cassette player, if you remember. It didn't really come in until about 87, 88.
Right, the Walkman. And you're referring to
the Walkman. Thank you. Yeah. And so the players that could afford that, because it costs around $400 or $500, the really sophisticated ones. Yeah. And so it was then that I noticed the beginning of the headset coming in on players that wanted to disassociate themselves socially at that point in their life. And these are players that were already in the league 4 or 5 years. And so, but the younger players are still signing autographs and still connecting. And then I watched as I went from the Sonics, I went to the Nets. Then I saw all 12 players wearing headsets. And we're going international.
Yeah, as technology progressed and everybody started adopting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So then we had So now hold up. So then it got to the point in the 90s where then players were wearing a Discman with the headset and warming up with it. They found some way to build, to have a belt, if you remember that. So now guys are warming up.
AirPods.
Thank you. And so all I'm saying is that
Bluetooth.
Thank you. So it's evolved. Okay. So this disassociative behavior that once used to be an influencer for kids has now removed himself almost completely, because you have private aircraft and players now can afford to fly private aircraft. And so they really have segregated themselves into a classification, a social classification. They don't want to be seen unless they're considered an influencer. So boom, there it is.
Oh, that's interesting. So original thought, an example might be wheel, steam engine, electricity, telephone, manned flight, radio, TV, internet, search engine, Google. As we come into the modern age, smartphones, Apple, internet, commerce, Amazon going forward, maybe robotic transportation and AI. All of that is, in my estimation, it's the most valuable type of thought. In other words, you can look at the great wealth that's been created by Jeff Bezos, Gates, etc., and it's all because of their original thought. But today, as you and I have talked, we have a lot of people who are followers, right? They're influenced by these influencers that you just talked about on Twitter, etc. Is that exploding trend? Is it positive to have influencers and followers, etc.? Would you rather see kids thinking for themselves, or really going down the track that we see coming?
I think, if anything, transparency over the last 4 years has come to the forefront. You don't have to belong to some Pentecostal Holy Redeemer, Foursquare congregation to understand and see that. I think that, those that accept the alternative universe, are going to understand, there is a right way and there's a wrong way. There is a yin and a yang. There is hot water and cold water. All I know is that cold water, it ain't warm. All right. It's cold for a reason. All right. Whereas warm water, all right, hot water, you can control, warm water, the temperature. And so right now, all right, we're in a situation where we have influencers that are cold water. Okay. And at some point, people are just going to say, enough of this.
Going to turn
I'm tired
it
of it.
Is that what you
Turn
mean?
it off. Yeah. They're going to turn it off.
They're
going to want something.
Are we getting to that point where they're...
Oh yeah. I see it. I see it happening within the next 30 days by far.
Really? You're talking about with the change of administrations?
With the administration and I think the social platform.
Really?
I think there's going to be a great change. I think Fox is going to go through a change. I think CNN's going to go through a change. I think MSNBC is going to go through a change. All right. I think it's going to be positive. I said before, Bruce, I said 2020 has been nothing but a myriad of aberrations. 2021, all right, will lead us into new revelations.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning 2022 enters us into recreations and a whole new beginning for our young people in sports and youth sports.
Well, Coach Tom, with your life experiences helping young people, we could fill several podcasts, and we haven't even told our listeners really all about your Hall of Fame coach father, your career, the work that you've done with so many athletes. You've mentioned in the past guys like Xavier McDaniel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's for another day. I want to wish you well in your upcoming work with young athletes in Belgium. I hope you get there soon. And as well as you've told me, young athletes from the UK, France, Netherlands, Scandinavia, Italy, Greece, and on and on. They'll all be coming to your camp at some point while you're in Europe this time around. Lucky them.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that. I do want you to know that I am so excited for Cindy and yours involvement, launching U equals me. And having that opportunity to be an ambassador, to have the privilege to be ambassador to represent you all in my entity of caretakers of the game. So I want to thank you for being a part of your team.
Well, I will tell you this. Our son, Freddie Jarvis, who's now at the University of Washington, was one of the Newell's jewels. And it was so developmental in his, not only his basketball life, but his life as a young man. And so thank you for that. And thank you, my friend, for sharing your time and your story with us today. And thank you, podcasters, for listening to today's U equals me podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed our broadcast today. If you have, please share with family and friends. For those who wish to support the U equals me Foundation, your tax-deductible purchases of U equals me logo wear can be found at uequalsme.org or our U equals me Etsy store, which is all one word in your Google search. For a complimentary copy of our ebook, Wisdom Along the Way, a book of notes and quotes, you can join our One Worlders group email list at u=me.org. Links will be in the show notes. Thank you. Much love around the world. Be safe, be kind, be you.